Thank you very much for the people that are here and people watching the online. Thank you for the people organizing this and the colleagues from Legal Continent. I'm José Manuel Cuevas, editor of El Mundial. And I have to talk that we are in changing now. It's changing time and it's actually here already. We have economical, political changes, and we have to know them to know what's the real impact that they're having on us and what's the goal of it. That's why today we're talking about Earth correlation in the European Union. First, I'm going to let Nacho Salcedo to talk.
Después fue José Medina Mateos, autor de la investigación, va a presentar los
José Medina Mateos, researcher of the political creation group La Mundial, and author of the report. And then we're doing a roundtable with Maite Serrano, manager of La Coordinadora, Álvaro Torres Suárez, deputy general manager of policy planification and coherence of the General Directorate of Sustainable Development Policies, and Lenis Rivera, expert in fair translation and sustainable finance in worldwide.
Buenas tardes a todas y a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jaime Díaz. I am a member of the governing board of La Coordinadora. I would like to start thanking the Círculo de Bellas Artes that had us today and collaborate with the magazine Le Grand Continent in the organization of this act today. Also thank Álvaro Torres from the Deputy General Manager of Policy Planification and Coherence of the General Directorate of Sustainable Development Policies, and also Lenis Rivera, that is an expert in fair transition and sustainable finance of WWF Spain. Thank you very much for being with us here today. Thank you also all the people that are here and all the people that are here online with us. My colleagues were telling me that almost a year ago, in 8th of July, in this same place, Círculo de Bellas Artes, more than 600 organizations of cooperation of development and humanitarian, they were presenting their proposals to the Spanish presidency of the Council of the European Union. 12 months have passed by, and I would say that sadly the situation didn't get better. I would say that we have challenges such as climate crisis, increase of the inequalities. We also have food insecurity. We also have troubles with social and political movements that I honestly think that they are far away from the values and the base principles of the European Union. This is why we're presenting today the report, the study that is called correlation, analysis of coherence of politics of the member states for sustainable development that is developed by the Coherence Index of La Coordinadora. Maybe we would say that from La Coordinadora, what we know is that we have not much time left. We have to do something. And for that, we think that we can fight mostly from Sunday on, that we have the European elections, because the European Union, as we think, it is a leader that can promote a new development model. And this development model has to be based on prosperity, on defense of the rights, that without this, meaning that the whole planet is not sustainable and that there is nothing. It cannot mean this. Thank you very much.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes. Soy Nacho Salcedo.
Good afternoon. I am Nacho Salcedo, coordinator of the Círculo de Bellas Artes. I just want to say briefly that we are very happy to be able to do the journey today. It is very important this week, waiting for the elections. Yesterday we had an alto, another journey, Europe talks about young people and diversity, and today we're talking about sustainable development. I think there are things that we didn't talk about in the last journeys and debates, and we think it is important to give voices to all these movements. So from us, just to say that we think we're in an important moment, very important social moment, and we, as part of Europe, we feel committed to fight from culture for freedom, diversity, social justice, human rights, and ecology. And this last one will be one of our pillars facing new season programmation. And we also have from June on and also in August, we will do a climate refugee here in the Círculo de Bellas Artes that will be open for everyone that is in Madrid. And I don't want to forget to thank everyone that is here in presence and online streaming. And also thank you, Inma Alonso, the coordinator, for coordinating this event that we think that is very important, as I said before. Well, so that's it. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bueno, José Medina Mateos es politólogo.
José Medina Mateos is a politólogo and an author of the investigation Coherence correlation in the European states.
Bueno, buenas tardes a todo el mundo.
Good afternoon, everyone, all that are here, and thank you for inviting us to La Mundial, and specifically me in the study that, as we said, tries to analyze the policies for sustainable development in the European Union. I don't have much time. I'm just going to talk about 4 ideas that I think are very important to understand how we have to face these sustainable development issues in the European Union, and then we will go to the roundtable. First, as Jaime said, the study uses a tool that is the Coherence Index. This tool is an effort of civil society that from 2016 tries to get exceed the GDP for progress, development, and advance of a society. It tries to get over this gap between developed and not developed countries. We think GDP is an indicator that has many limits as a prosperity indicator, mainly because of 2 reasons. First, because there are a lot of activities and elements that we think that generate prosperity that is not able to show the data, and second, because it cannot show the cost of the economic growth in terms of global justice. There is a consensus in the development world and even in the world of public aid that the GDP has many limits. As I said, last year, in the European Parliament, there was this conference that it was very important, the conference that was called Beyond the Growth, which many commissions of the European Parliament participated. And as I said, it is a key element to try to understand the sustainable growth, try to exceed the GDP. In this frame, the index, the Policy Coherence for Sustainable Development Index, uses it to achieve it. We understand understanding as a mechanism to do policies not less incoherent, but we think that it has to political gaze. This needs to allow us to see what are those policies and those social practices that have more impact in justice and at a global level, and with which levels and social groups are left aside at an internal level. So they must show like a political transforming map that show us what do we have to do and what must we stop doing. That we have the index for 2 logics. One logic is we'll measure variables in the frame of for transition. One is ecological, one is democratic, the other is socio-economic, and the other is feminist. And we think that these to achieve the transformation to more sustainable societies that are, let's say, better developed, and also analyzes what that contributes in the negative way. So what we try is to live from the Luxembourg model. Luxembourg has very good indicators of accreditation, access to public services, but also we cannot have 192 Luxembourgs in Europe because it has finance opacity or terms of enacting a global economy that avoids the development of some countries of the South. This index will try to create an indicator that is able to mix both logics. What do we have to do and what we're doing in a positive way, but what do we have to stop doing if we want to confirm that we are a country that is moving forward in sustainable politics? What happens if we look at the European Union? What we look is what we see here is cross correlation. Cross correlation analyzes the situation of different countries, how they are moving forward about the positive variables with up until how much their development values impact the whole planet through the based on the impact and the planetary pressures. And what we see is two things. First is that no country is in this empty space. There is a political space on which the development of the countries is sustainable for the rest of the countries. This means that the development of a country, it is not based on the non-possibility of the development of the countries of the South. And we see as we move forward on the horizontal line, it means as we move forward on some of the transition in employment, social development, it usually gets further from this empty space. So it means it has bigger impacts. This means that there's no country is in this empty space, but that no country is doing things right. It is doing this. No country is achieving that their transition is not avoiding the development of other countries. This means we cannot use the Luxembourg model or the Finland or the Denmark model. In Spain has always been very popular to say that we all want to be as Denmark. It is a model to follow in terms of political matters, but it is not useful. Finland, for example, is the only is the country in the planet that has better values, the higher access to education, better numbers of employment, but it's the country 135 in terms of planetary impact. We cannot also have 192 Finland. Once that we've done this in the study, once that we've looked at this index, we do the context of this case, and we see how the politics of the European Union is facing the question of sustainable growth through transition to a new development model. And it is true, if we analyze what has happened in the last 5 years, that in the last legislature has been a huge political bet for transforming the development model and trying to achieve a transition. Probably the political program or the political tool that is more important for this is Green Deal, that we all know, the European Green Deal, that sets 2 goals to achieve climatic neutrality and for 2050, and also the substitution of fossil fuels for renewable fuels. I'm going to read a little bit of the European Commission that presented the Green Deal, and what it looked for is to transform the European Union for a good economy that is competitive with no net emissions in 2050, and on which the economic growth it is not linked to the use of resources. This is a clear political will. In Europe, we have the agreement to get to this transition. It exists this idea to go for the transition, but what we miss is a look for this transformation of the model of sustainable growth. the development. It means being based on the cost correlation to understand that we cannot try to do the transition basing on the others, trying to get examples from the others. Because in this case, it is a weak sustainable model. It means, for example, let's do the same with the same resources. Let's do the same with the same plan. And this is what the Green Deal says and the policies in the European Union. This is why what we saw at the beginning of the year, when there were some movements on any field, these green politics have backward. But in the European Union, we find what we call the not avoidable question. If we really want to achieve sustainability in the European Union, we have to get over this vision and we have to face the harsh correlation. We have to design a new society model that is sustainable and fair. To sum up, the transition model has three axes. The Green Deal, the ecological transition, as I was saying, that is probably the most important, the one that has occupied more institutional space in the last year. And its main limit is the weak sustainability, to substitute the capitals, substitute the energetic resources to do the same in a sustainable way. This point of view, from the point of view of coherence, that's that from the moment that the war in Ukraine starts and is unurgent in Europe to look for substitutes for the gas, they do agreements with countries that violate the human rights and that are as bad as Russia, because the urgent thing is to keep on doing the same, but with different, let's say, resources. Second X is digital transition that also was very important in this legislature, also in the recuperation plan in Spain. And the same when we analyze what are the political objectives of the digital transition, we see the same. Mainly the digital transition, it is considered to be an instrument for the European economy to link to the global economy, because competitivity depends on technology, on adaptation to new forms of global capitalism, and digitalization is a way of making our societies more adaptable and our economy more competitive. What happens that when this political goal it is not in agree with human rights, these are the human rights that are forgotten. So there is an incoherence in the sustainable development. And last but not least, the social transition as a question that is articulated around just transition plans.
Pilar de derechos sociales en la Unión Europea, sino que sobre todo un instrumento para paliar las consecuencias
to reduce the consequences of the other two transitions that are mostly natural. Because, as for example, through digital transition, the employment is going to grow. So let's do just plans, but let's not ask ourselves if this digital transition is needed or not. This is happening, and something that is being obvious since the ending of last year and this beginning of this year is the new context of growing militarization of the European Union from the war in Ukraine, but not just. It's a growing speech in the leaders of the European Union and also in the Commission that used to be a geopolitical commission that was open to move forward in this question, that the European Union has to start to militarize, and this provokes a process of securitization of the rest of transition. It means we don't do the ecological transition because we have to achieve sustainability or we have to achieve this empty space, but because we cannot depend on Russian gas anymore. So it is not an ecological matter anymore, it is a security matter because we don't have gas, the gas that we used to have. It is a security process that it is getting to all the dimensions of the sustainable development, and it eliminates the political discussion about and eliminates the democracy of all the other questions. I end with a little bit of what Josep Borrell said once. I think it's a definition of what I was talking about. He said in 2020, before the invasion in Ukraine, it was already in the main idea of the Commission and the turnaround that the Commission gave in the last years. The strategic autonomy, it is not magic. It is a long-term process for the Europeans to guide their destiny to defend our interests and values in a world that is more difficult at this time, a world that makes us to trust ourselves to guarantee our future. This, from the point of view of the political current, I ask, if the world is too difficult, is it worth that we are responsible with this world? And to end up, two big ideas, then Maite will talk about more things. First, as I was saying before, the European Union cannot avoid the question of the transformation of the development model. We have to move forward another transformation model. We cannot keep on doing the same, but with different sources, renewable sources, or with less CO2 emissions. We have to move forward another model because ecological questions go further, as well as other questions as humanitarian and rights commitment. And nowadays, we're in a risk of going backwards, even on what we move forward, and we can allow not to go backwards in the context that we are living right now.
Gracias, José. Pasamos ahora sí a la mesa redonda, por favor. Bueno, para poner este diagnóstico en perspectiva,
with the perspective on this diagnosis, I'm going to let Maite Serrano Oñate talk. He is Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Sociology, manager of the Spanish Development NGO Coordination La Coordinadora. Álvaro de Torres, he's a biologist specialized in ecology and environmental, deputy general manager of policy planification and coherence of General Directorate of Sustainable Development Policies of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, European Cooperation of Spain. And Lenis Rivera, Doctor of International Affairs, expert in fair transition and sustainable finance in Worldwide Fund for Nature. So, Maite, we'll start with you a little bit following the line of what Jose was saying. What are the recommendations of the European Union and how to articulate with them with the member states? Thank you very much, Jose Manuel, for the question. Before entering recommendations, I would like to talk about these results per countries because the European Union is not an homogeneous environment. For example, in these countries that Jose was talking about that have better achievements, either ecological, feminist, environmental, its main challenge has to be with priority definitions, where the other 22 countries have to face more than one or two transitions to move forward to sustainable development. For example, we have the case of countries such as Germany, Luxembourg, or Netherlands that present important inconsistencies in fiscal matters because their high financial opacity facilities practices that undermine public resources within and outside their borders, or other group of countries with large arms production and marketing industry and high military spending, such as Spain, France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, which especially have important challenges for export of conventional weapons. But what is common to all countries is the need to reduce their planetary impact. Just to give you a fact, to maintain the model of production and consumption in the European Union, we will require 4 planets, something that humanity cannot afford. And even more, if we remember that we are talking just of the 7% of the population. It means that, yeah, all the countries and the European Union are facing this course correlation at a historic moment. That is not the future, it is the present, and it makes us try to reassure the possibilities of millions of people day to day. And this needs a responsible exercise of responsibility of the European Union with its societies and with the world. About the recommendations in the report, there is a list of recommendations about the politics and the transitions that we have not time to go through, but I invite you to review in the report that you can see in the coordinator webpage, but I have to stop the 3 ideas that I think are very important. The first is that the economies of the European Union have to allow a new social model that combines well-being and rights of the citizens. And here we talk about define this good society. That is how we talk about it in the report. And the first thing is try to get this political coherence to get this goal of a new social Second idea is that it is the moment to recover the role of the public authorities in the economy, reintroducing the discussion on ecological planning, on public ownership of strategic sectors, or food sovereignty, and also to start to recover this consent, the economical decisions that cannot be unlinked from the responsibility towards society. And for that, it is important that we have to start to redefine the treaties of the European Union as what we know as norms of budget norms. It is obvious that we cannot face social or economical transition without resources, and the austerity politics, it is a limit for any change or transformation in this sense. And the third idea, but not less important, it is in order to build a new European social model which promotes what we call the good society, institutions and their public policies should focus on those elements of the development model that have the capacity to combine welfare and social rights with the lowest environmental cost on the planet. We are talking about issues such as democratization, the construction of a multilateral and rights-based global governance, the extension and guarantee of women's rights, and of social protection systems. There all are politics that imply per se an increase in planetary pressures, and yet they are the issues that guarantee a citizen with fuller and free lives. To sum up, the challenge is to advance in harmony through the different transitions without putting into risk the sustainability of the planet. Thank you. We were talking about the
el enfoque de coherencia que al final viene de la OCDE y está en los objetivos de desarrollo
Albert,
sostenible.
I know that it is a wide question, but how can these financial flows be taxed audit, especially considering that they involve the third country? Well, first I wanted to thank you all the participation of
sostenible donde trabajo y bueno, daros la enhorabuena por el estudio.
Yes, congratulating all of you for the study and for the event. And for the question. There are questions that are a little bit, I should write for a couple of hours to be able to...
La pregunta que me has lanzado,
but about the question, I think my training of formation, it is on the environmental world. I am a biologist and I work many years in the environment, with the environment. So it is funny because on the 80s already started the concept of sustainable development in this field of environment and ecology, not ecology.
Cuando se planteó, ¿no?, en el informe Brundtland las tres componentes del desarrollo sostenible, que es económico, social, ambiental, en realidad
they were, well, when it started, they were just talking about sustainability because we have to care about the ecosystem because it is, I'm not saying it's dying, but it is transforming itself. And transformation usually means simplification. This in social systems can be compared. So it is true that the term policy coherence, if we want to reach this sustainable development, it is obvious if we do not manage these three transformations, we won't get sustainability. I think that I'm going to talk about an old history when I ended my career. I'm talking about the years 97, 98. There was a rule on the 80s about environmental.
This was turned into a national legislation about environmental impact. And it was the first time that I saw that we could use political tools from a sector to control the activity of another sector. For example, we wanted to do a roadway, which was crossing an environment, a particular environment. So the engineers were saying, okay, this way, because the costs were minimal and it was the shorter way, and because they weren't crossing any cathedral, for example. But then, with this European regulation, before doing that motorway, we had to do an environmental impact study to see what environmental impact this highway would have. Of course, it is a public facility, but we needed this evaluation, which is a whole process, to see the balance. Of course, we want the highway because it's good, it's a social good, it will help the social development, but we will do it destroying the environment. And then we will also lose this environmental good for us. So we are seeing here two policies at the same time. And so it was established a little control. And every time it's more complicated, but it was just these two policies, environmental or economy. And I think that actually the cooperation for development, which is more my thing, the first time that we saw it, the cooperation law was in the 1995, and later on we have seen it in the different plans. But the how or the when were not developed. But it was the first time that this concept of coherence was taken from the European legislation. So they were saying, okay, let's do cooperation, but let's call it sustainability in a coherent way. From many multilateral institutions, they have diversified this concept of politics. I have it here written down because otherwise I forget. In 2009, there were recommendations for the institutional practices in environmental matters. And I think that the matter for me, after reading the recent history, the essential thing is the Agenda 2030. because it is a global agreement. Last week, I tried to talk about the Agenda 2030, and I was trying to tell them that 90% of the countries in the world agree on that commitment. So this brings already some coherence. We are going in the same direction, and we are on the same track. So from there, and implementing the Agenda 2030 in Spain, which, from my point of view, was quite intense, because in the work of the ministry, there was an before and an after. And there was an effort from the public administration. I'm talking about my sector because that's what I know the best. But I remember that the first time that we saw a report to evaluate what we had done in different sectors and the goals. For us, it was really difficult. Apart from that, the fact that the first evaluation practices and exercises were really complicated, so we didn't know how to answer them. But in 2006, I think there was a turn in policy cooperation and coherence, and apart from that, apart from the fact that we have SDGs, individual SDGs, they are all linked to each other. And this is something consistent. For example, the positive correlation, if I impact on the environment, probably I will also affect the SDG in water, for example. So there's always a correlation between the different development goals. And to give you a current fact, I think that these policies have been gaining weight. We had in 2003 also an article which is talking about policy coherence. It is a general article, but then we have also the sixth pact that was presented today in the Parliament, and there is an article where we do think and talk about how we are going to implement these policies in this context of the development policies. That's my point of view. Thank you very much. Well, to talk about what we have done so far, we also should mention what we are facing. Last year, you were talking about the triple crisis, economic, social, and environmental crisis. What is the most important fact of each crisis? Okay, thank you, first of all, for the invitation. I am really happy to be here. I have been getting closer to this report, to this study, and I think it is really relevant what it brings to us. It gives us a balanced vision, also the different perspectives of transitions in particular. Before going to answer the question, it caught my attention in a really positive way how we are not only talking about ecological transition, social transition, and the rest, but we're also talking about the feminist transition, not as a transversal approach, but as a transition, as getting somewhere, as a part of a whole. So I wanted to strike this out, and now I will answer the question that you were raising. This idea of approaching the environmental crisis, the biodiversity loss, and the social crisis as an integrated crisis looks for seeing how these crises are feeding each other. Environmental crisis is the one that we are perceiving each day, and it is increasingly more visible for us. And then the biodiversity loss, we don't perceive it that much, but it is also really present. And it also has a phase, which is the social crisis as well. So the climate crisis, the environmental crisis, they have a common point, and this is the vulnerability, how different communities, different territories and countries can perceive and live this crisis with more or less intensity depending on the development that they have been able to reach, or depending on the policies, public policies that they have, or the financial support that they have to face this situation. But there's another point. The social crisis, this inequality crisis, can also make this environmental crisis becomes more severe. When we analyze reports from development organizations like Oxfam, we see that, in particular, the population that's wealthier are actually impacting more to this crisis. Or when we go to central principles of the climate equality, see again that the countries that are more developed are impacting more with their emissions to this environmental crisis. So the idea of seeing them integrated is to perceive how they are feeding each other and at the same time avoid some of these crises, to not to reproduce these vulnerabilities. So when looking for these transitions, we don't want to impact negatively on our ecosystems or these populations that are more exposed. And here we should consider other aspects like the fair transition, fair resilience, which are concepts that are getting incorporated as mechanisms that allow us to transit in this process, in this transformation process that is being developed without losing this vision that we have. And on the other hand, this climate change goal of not surpassing this 1.5 degrees of global warming, and this goal would be developed in a safe way, but safe, with safe we mean the society as we know it. And also these goals that we're considering
el año pasado. Entonces, creo que como introducción y como aporte, pues me gustaría
framework of diversity that we were mentioning. Okay, thank you very much. We're talking also about the current time, because now we will have the European elections, and in April, the European Commission published the goals and priorities for the next term. This includes strengthening the economic interest and presence of the private sector to the detriment of the development and foreign policy approach in those alliances with emerging markets and developing countries. And how does this look from the perspective of the US Coherence Index and course correlation? Well, actually, this is the Directorate General for Alliances and Coherent Alliances and Cooperation. And actually, the most neoliberal vision comes defined by the European treaties and also from the development agreement. And one of the priorities is the eradication of poverty and also the integration of the environmental protection in the sustainable development. And this organization is considering to start the world but the other way around. So instead of using these regulations as a guide, they are considering that policy cooperation is a tool available to economic and strategic resources, looking for to ensure the energy and sustainability sectors in the European Union. So people and the planet should be in the center, should be the focus. And this is actually a step back from the goals of the Agenda 2030. And it also risks all the advances, all the steps forward that we did, the Sustainable Development Matter. And actually, this will have a negative impact on the role of the European Union at an international level. Regarding what we just said, you have dealt with the transition of financial flows, especially private ones. How can these financial flows be taxed, especially considering that they involve third countries? How can these flows be taxed or audited? Well, it is a difficult aspect to monitorize how all these flows, all these investment flows from the private sector are aligning to these global goals that were established in the framework of the Paris Agreement and that now are getting established in the biodiversity framework. These international treaties include that this is one of the primary goals, that finance flows are aligned with these global commitments, and different social organizations are actually monitoring this, how these finance flows are developing. And they are looking for a regulation that looks for transparency concerning where these investments are going, because they want to prove if these investments are sustainable and are in line with the global commitments. This year, one of the milestones that were achieved in the European Union were with the directive of
se estaba pidiendo. Digo que es un hito porque realmente no ha sido lo suficientemente ambiciosa y no ha podido abarcar
about the due diligence. And it was actually, it couldn't incorporate all the companies that they wanted it to, but it was a milestone because now we're not talking only about this transparency regulation of having to communicate what our investments are, but this new directive is an obligation to do it. And so it wants to monitorize my value chain, the ones who are providing my company, are they also sustainable? That's what this due diligence directive is aiming to. And this new regulation is actually too short for it. One of the aspects, the most important aspect is that at a global level, there are different forums and different spaces where people are debating about what sustainable finances are, and they are looking for more transparency and more indicators that allow to know really in which direction these funds are going. Well, this is maybe the other side of the coin, but you know the institutions from inside. What will this guideline imply in terms of policy coherence, especially in Spain? Well, I could give my opinion as an employee in the cooperation sector. At some point, I have been closer to this European movement that wants to leverage private capital to invest in developing countries. I am actually, well, my opinion is not that critical, maybe, but I do have some reserves. I do think that there's a first momentum from the European Union. I don't want you to understand this wrong, but it is kind of a competition, a strategical competition. This factor is there. I think this is so. And I will explain it with an example. I was in Cape Verde, in the Isla de Mayo. And there in Cape Verde, there is such a great investment, you cannot imagine. There is a university which is, we can compare it to the autonomous university in Madrid, maybe, and it is in a city that has maybe like 50,000 inhabitants. It is a powerful investment that is supposed to move the country's economy, and we say it in a simple way, this would affect also the education sector, but of course it is not proportional. They didn't even take away the characters in Chinese because this investment was from China. And this was incredible. And at the same trip, I was with a European delegation from the European Commission, and they wanted to present this approach of mobilizing the private sector to invest in developing countries. And it is true that the initial approach that they were suggesting was like, okay, we do want to invest in facilities, infrastructures, and we do want to bring private capital, but not this way. It is easy to say, but let's do how we do it. But the speech was, yes, we want to do it, but in the correct way. And how? Well, adapting infrastructures to the social ecosystem that we have there and to the economic ecosystem. And of course, always respecting human rights, respecting labor rights, respecting environment, and different filters with the European Union standards. It is easy to say, but let's see how we do it. But here we have a problem. If we want to compete and we want to do it right, and we want to create a sustainable development, because we did many evaluations so that this can be done in a sustainable way. To compete against the Chinese, it is complicated because they don't have these filters. So they can get into the market way faster and in a directer way. But what they do is a dialogue with the politicians there, but not with the civil society, for example. There's not a dialogue where they establish needs, for example. And the European Union is aiming to do this in the correct way. And the thing is, this creates an unsteady feeling, this idea of moving companies and private investment to create development. In my opinion, it is not that bad. We are starting to see, well, the experts are starting to see that the support for development is becoming too short. It is not enough to create a positive impact straight away. So why shouldn't we bring in private investment? As long as there are impact studies, impact evaluations before bringing in this investment. And this should be done with political criteria and including the private sector and also the different involved parties in these partner countries, because otherwise it will get wrong. There has to be this dialogue with stakeholders in the field and, of course, the governments. Apart from the competition with China, the European Union is talking about geopolitics. The speech is different now. And a premise of the research is that development processes are interdependent. How to make those in the EU compatible with those beyond its borders if we move to more competitive relations? Well, the thing is that they are not only competitive, but we are in a really dangerous context of war-like escalation at a global level. And this is having an impact, and the military costs are getting higher. Actually, Europe is the second country with more military expenses after the United States, and also the second powerful country in digital innovation after the artificial intelligence. So if we would apply cooperation logics, thinking that the planet and humanity, there's only one, and we have to work together because of the interconnection that we have there. Where we have a conflict or a warlike situation, we have to approach it in a day-to-day logics where we can think about security and safety for humans. We have to think about public policies from the point of view of the peace, of guaranteeing rights, protecting the planet, and getting or realizing what actually this violence culture is, because it is being used as an election motto, or like for the elections, it is used this kind of speech. And so we need to establish international agreements that revert the colonial and sexist policies that were existing so far. So actually, we have to look for a global cooperation and interconnected cooperation. And this has to do with how we establish these interconnections. It is not only in which direction we go, but also who will this policy, this politics impact. The track should not be military, like not go in the military direction, because in the last year there have been greater investment in military matters, but we should invest in peace, in democratic quality, and in human rights, of course. At the same time, the other side of the coin is the environmental impact. The Russian invasion of Ukraine also led us to look for other LNG suppliers and the revival of nuclear energy. Both avenues serve to diversify partners and reduce dependence on Russia, but linked energy transformation to security. Is it inevitable to follow this path, or can we undo it after seeing the transitions that we have been carrying out? Well, I wanted to say before something about what we were saying. So it was related to what Maite was saying regarding the finance, the international environmental funds or the investments for the environment, because the COP19 is being established as the financing. So it is really important how compromised the countries are in investment and public finance, especially to adapt and to mitigate the climate change. And these are added engagements in cooperation matters and development aids. And this is what they are looking for, that there are more and more policies aligned to these environmental goals.
de seguridad, y seguridad ha sido una variante que ha estado muy asociada también al tema de la
variable that has been associated to energy. Historically, it's been part of the vision, and in some way the analysis, political analysis of the foreign politics or the foreign relations that is made of the energetic sector. In terms of transition, it has its risks, mainly in the term of ecological transition, because it gets us to other paradigms on which the main thing is to reassure the access to a secure and viable ministry for my population. So it is a perspective from the inside and the domestic, and it might forget a little bit this transition onto where, to whom it impacts, what are the consequences that it has in these other territories. So I think it is important not to lose the perspective of the objectives and the goals that enables this ecological transition, and not to get in the discussion that is just about energetic security, when it is also one of the arguments, because we've heard this in some debates, and it is one of the, I don't know if to call it collateral effect, that it has ecological transition that is not just an energetic transition, but in the case of energetic transition, and even more if it is a just energetic transition, it can generate some energetic independence for some countries, but even it can impact in other aspects, from democratization of energy to higher citizen participation on what is consumed and how, in energetic terms. It is more than just the security concept. We're talking about the public financing. If there was any measure from the USA and China to protect the industries about transition, the European Union is also having different methods in this matter. We're talking about the European Union, but what is the margin of the member states in this more wide vision? First, something to add to what I said before, because it is important to have like this good vision. Just to say that during the presidency of the Congress of the European Union, I think that the position of Spain facing this proposal of the European Union for the development, cooperation for development, that was based on two pillars: ecological transition and a green transition, and a digital transition. Facing this scenario that was ahead of us about the private investment, it is true that from Spain, from the foreign ministry, we fought and we insisted and we got to aid to the conclusion of the Development Commission of the European Union, the third transition that is social. I think that this is because of an exercise of policy coherence. It means careful, yes, digital, yes, green, but if we're thinking about huge investments in infrastructure, let's not lose the gaze of the social components, because if we lose the social component, it is not sustainable, and it is not going to be a cooperation for the sustainability of all, but just of a few. And about what you're saying, I think this is a question of a geopolitical question, global geopolitical question. You say it like that, all of a sudden, what is our margin? Well, today we don't have a huge margin. We have the dependency of raw materials. I don't know if part of the policy of the European Union is looking forward to compensate this kind of unbalance and try to act in other countries through a change. I would like to think that this is not the case, but the European Union, it is a thin wire between the USA and the China economy. If we miss something, I think, well, we don't have a huge margin, we have a little margin. Yeah, it is not just a geopolitical matter, but also in the global or specific public economies. I think that the member states have to do discussions, talk about discussions with third parties, because they have different opinions on the relation with USA. Well, I'm going to be a little bit political incorrect and not to talk just about the political parties. We as a society, as people, as consumers, how can we sell our cooperation to the development to pay less for the battery of a phone, for example? Are we actually do we have the will to pay less for the battery of a phone? If we want to have very cheap batteries for our phones, we have to sell our soul to the devil. This is the capitalist way of doing. So it means what's our will to pay for things, really, as individuals, as an state. Okay, so starting to sum up, we cannot forget this weekend there are European elections, and the environment can change in the institutions and in Brussels and in Europe. The statistics say that the right is going to win, and this is going to put obstacles in some of the policies. How do you see from the how do you see this from your point of view? The right might win. Well, the provision, the forecast is not very good. There is an increase of parties that are against the human rights, that they deny climate change, science, gender violence, are visions that are obstacles to implement policy coherence that might orientate the public politics towards sustainable development. There's also a serious risk that there is going backwards on the human rights, on the gender equality, and on the world system and the sustainability of the planet. I think these elections are more important than ever because the European Parliament is still being one of the institutions that are more important in the field of the defense of the rights. And if we are on the doors of a change of a cycle, that it might mean a comeback to the austerity, the politics, the growing of security politics, and not human security, but military and police security instead of policies that invest on the well-being of people and the environment. And well, I think that from the organizations of social civil that we work in the global justice, we're making an effort trying to move this vote that contributes to promote different political options that defend sustainable development as a base. But yeah, it is a difficult environment. In the case of Spain, the statistics was showing that Spain has a better growth in feministic transformation, but not in the weapon sale that started mainly with the Gaza war and Ukrainian war, and also the socio-economic transformation and the matter of the employment. Alvaro, how this change of cycle can impact to the politics that Spain is working with? Well, if there is really a confirmation of a change of a cycle, there will be changes, of course, because the priorities that we're having in front of us, the parties that are right now and so on, well, they're different. I really I don't want to say which changes are going to happen. Also, from my personal point of view, well, I'm afraid actually of the positions that deny, for example, the climate change, because I think there is a matter on which we move forward a lot. From the point of view of environmental matter is one of that we work the most. It has been a mediatic and studied matter in an intergovernmental environment with a report that gave us alerts of what's happening. And well, I insist, this is my personal opinion, but I'm a little bit afraid of what's going to happen because we are in the limit of yes or no, and about gender politics, well, it's just the same. They might change. And it's what Maite was saying, to have the sensation of losing what we've achieved. But well, this is the real world. People will vote and will face the results. But the visions of denying gender violence, climate change, and all those things are things that, well, are dangerous. I understand that people that are in the government right now are worried also about this, because from the point of view of cooperation for development, these matters are the ones that need more, that have more investment. The commitment that we have right now in the government, also in the previous one, okay, but in this there's more commitment, and I think these things might change. Well, Lenny, do you want to add something? What do you think about moving from a taxation to a fair transformation? I think one of the well, I want to talk about what you were talking before, the competence, the value that we can see, and I might discriminate a little bit because I've been doing this for a long time, but sustainability is a value, it's a number in itself, and the field of finance is more accurate. Accepted as it is. And the European Union has been doing more or less a kind of leadership in this sustainable finance, and will be added to these risks that my colleagues were talking about. So it would be sad to say that the European Union achieved in many European forums, and this leadership that gave in terms of economical terms that we usually talk about, that gave competitivity to their companies. It gave a base for the operations that the European Union wants to achieve and wants to answer to some standards. So it could be sad going backwards in climate change and many other aspects. Negationism is something that that people don't like, and each time it's more important to keep on researching on crisis, climate crisis, biodiversity crisis. We don't know which the result will be, but what is obvious is that we will keep on working to maintain this agenda active, and that the goals that we've marked, that we can achieve it. And about just transformation, I think that a little bit what I was talking about at the beginning of my intervention, I think one of the key aspects is what do we reproduce, or what do we avoid to reproduce with these transformation processes. It looks like this is one of the key aspects, this gaze to the transition process, and how this transition can stop the process is needy about economical diverse citizen participation, women community participation, indigenous groups participation. I'm talking at a global level. How to build this transition? It is gonna build just a transition, or a transition that creates a transformation. Thank you very much, Maite and Álvaro. We have time for a question of the public. If anyone has a question for any of the speakers, this is the time to do it.
Mire.
Hola, muchas gracias a todos. De verdad me
Very much all of you. I think this was a very interesting talk, and I think this is space to talk about so important matter about to face the elections. I think it's very important, so thank you very much.
desarrollo interdependiente y especialmente hablando de la cuestión de la transición energética.
Talking about the energetic transition and decarbonization of the European economy. Thinking about this, I thought about a world on which maybe these challenges might affect the development of other countries, countries that might be framed into outside of Europe, like Algeria, that are independent in the matter of hydrocarbons. So my question is, what are the goals from the foreign cooperation of Europe and the sustainability growth? How to convince them to also change to the European transition? Thank you very much. Convince these countries. So, who wants to answer this question? Go for it. I don't know. Is the case what you're talking about? It happens in Nigeria and in many other places. We can talk about Venezuela and every country that have natural and geological raw material that give them fuel and gas. I don't know. This about convincing, it is difficult. I would say more than convincing, we have to negotiate with something, because convincing it's well, Algeria is from its oil. It is GDP, it's everything for them. So in this case, well, I think we can do interventions based. I mean, it is. I don't know if it's true or fake. That is what the Arabic countries are doing. They are doing huge investment on alternative energy. I don't know, thinking about when their oil is finished, it is true that they are doing it. So I don't know if through development policies that enables alternative energies, clean energies, but you have to offer something in exchange. You're not going to change a system that is closed for them just for nothing. You have to negotiate. But I think everything is based on being able to offer something that can be interesting for them and can substitute their main source. So give them the tools to socio-economical development. But it's a little bit complicated, I think. I don't know what you think. Yeah, it is a complex question, but in general terms, well, I would say that in many occasions we tend to put the importance on what the other countries are doing to face the needed measures to end up with fuel fossils and the problems of the climate change. But we're not taking into account that the developed countries, we've had a historical impact on the damage of the environmental conditions, on the loss of biodiversity, and on the increase of climate change that make us responsible. And this responsibility that we are asking the other countries, as Alvaro was saying, has to be a differentiated responsibility. We cannot ask for these countries that did not contribute as we did, that they cover the cost of our damages and of making this planet a sustainable planet. Well, just to add some ideas, I think this reminds me of what happens in the context of international negotiations of climate change. In COP28 from last year, some weird result was that for the first time there was a reference that fossil fuels are the main responsible of climate change, and we were talking about a transition to fossil fuels. We wanted to put timelines.
No se termina de ir más rápido porque justamente en las negociaciones pues estamos todos.
We don't go faster because we are negotiating. We're looking for an agreement, but this makes that what we achieve has some, I don't know if you call it,
internacionales, pero digamos una legitimidad a nivel internacional.
legal value. But what is a fact is that these timelines are very important because they give signals to the market, the energetic market, the investors. And in the case of the climate change, it creates two kinds of risks to the economy and investment and the partners. The economic risk is what we see in the news, the increase of the frequency and the frequency of the climate change, but also it generates risks of transition, and this means that it decreases or affects the value of the actives, of the assets that are facing these activities that are polluting a lot. So when we establish timelines and specific calendars, it will be easier to planify this transition and to think about this diversification, and not just because it is talked about in a multilateral environment, but because all the policies go forward to this transition, because I cannot invest just here, and I have to plan climate transition. And I think this can also give something to this vision. Okay, so we end up with this. Thank you very much to the three of you, the Círculo de Bellas Artes, la Coordinadora, and the colleagues from Le Grand Continent, and the people watching this online. Let's see what happens on Sunday with the elections, European elections. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.